It's a pleasure to be here in Australia addressing this very important topic. I think that the title and the last word of Nexus, it's crucial here because it's a word that reflects, that capture probably better the increase interactions between both regions in the last 10 or 15 years. I began to do research in this area before it was fashion. And I have a hard time trying to prove that my object of study really existed 15 years ago. It was, really on the margins of everything. Nobody really cared about what I was doing. Even when I went to the United States 12 years ago, my research was totally irrelevant. Things began to change with the famous visit of Hu Jintao to Latin America for APEC in 2004, the visit in Santiago, Chile, and to Brazil and to Argentina. At least in the United States, the press began to cover and take great interest in what China was doing in Latin America, and of course today we don't have to explain that much, right? China is number one, number two main partner of most countries in the region, and of course this interaction in trade, and since I would say 2008, 2009, in certain countries in the region, investment also it's growing really very quick. In Brazil, in Peru, in Venezuela, in Argentina. Finance, it's also beginning to be important in certain countries. So, in other words, we're talking about Asia and particularly about China because it's unavoidable. If you want to understand the economy, the political, economic effects of this relationship, and even some aspect of international relations of Latin America, you have to deal with China and with Asia. I usually start talking about the economic realm, the economic component, because of course it has been the most important one in this recent story of last 10 or 15 years. But because we have already a good conversation about this, and we have the closing remarks of this conference with Enrique, it's a friend and colleague. We have been discussing about this for many years, and he's an economist. I am a political scientist. I would prefer that most of this economic aspect will be addressed by Enrique. And I will, instead of this, I will concentrate in what was originally the second part of my presentation, that is more related to political aspects. In the middle of both, there is a growing field for research, quite recent. That is, of course, the political economy of the relationship, the impacts of the relation inside each country in Latin America, that it's beginning to be a full area of research. We have impacts in terms of environmental impacts, we have impact on native population close to mining areas. I mentioned already the issue around water, which is usually highly political, pollution of water. So there are a new crop of young researchers that is increasingly bringing to our attention the scope and the magnitude and the evolving pace of the impact. So there is a full area of research. Even if you're not an expert on international relations, still you can be doing something of value in terms of China, Latin America, just analyzing this growing impact in many countries in different sectors. I myself have written a chapter for a book by the Woodrow Wilson Center in Washington that will appear, I think, this month, analyzing the political economy of China-Argentina relation and how you can use this part of the external relation of Argentina in order to try to make sense of what happened in Argentina politically in the last 10 years or during the period of Kirchnerismo in Argentina. It's a crucial variable to understand the peak and the glory of Kirchnerism and the decline of Kirchnerism in Argentina. You can establish several very useful connections. So, but moving to the political relation, China for many years had kept a number of political relations with the parties in Latin America. The Communist Party in China have relationship with more than 120 political parties in Latin America, even with countries that China doesn't have diplomatic relations. They used to have party-to-party relations. China also have tried to deal with Latin America on a bilateral basis. Until very recently, China have been reluctant to engage in multilateral dialogue or cooperation with Latin America. And so China have established in a very classical China imperial style a strategic relationship with several countries, with Brazil, with Mexico, with Argentina, with Venezuela. There are slightly difference in the wording of this strategic relationship. Now the last round of innovation has been integral strategic relationship. Nobody knows really very well about the meaning of this wording, but the Chinese make no error in assigning one label or another label to different countries. There are several areas of interaction in international fora that have bring China and certain Latin American countries closer. 3 Latin American countries are members of the G20, Mexico, Brazil, and Argentina. 3 countries are also members of APEC, Mexico, Chile, and Peru, and of course the relationship of China and Brazil in the BRICS. China became an observer in the Organization of American States several years ago, and it successfully blocked an attempt by the United States to make the Republic of China, Taiwan, also an observer at OAS. China gained also membership in the Inter-American Development Bank, which is of course an economic thing, but it had political consequences. It took 15 years of tough campaign for the Chinese to become a member of the IDB. And they achieved this goal at the beginning of the economic crisis. It was announced in 2000, by the end of 2008. It was officially started in January of 2009. But it was a goal that was pushed without pause by China for 15 years to become a member of the IDB. There are certain elements that are quite important to mention, to specific mention. China produced a white paper on Latin America in 2008. Before it produced a white paper on China-Africa and on China-Europe. It was the last region to have its own paper. I have talked with several people in China, and according what I discovered, it took more than 2 years to produce a 10-page report on China policy towards Latin America. and around 200 people was engaged in the preparation of this report. So, you know, you read the report and say, well, yeah, this is quite general, you know, but it took a lot of effort to try to put in one piece a comprehensive evaluation of the goals and direction of Chinese foreign policy. More on this in a moment. There are two bilateral relations that are quite particularly important for not obvious reasons. One is the relations between China and Venezuela, and the other one has been the relation between China and Cuba. You know, during the Cold War, at some point, with the split of the socialist camp, Cuba basically made a decision and it chose to side with the Soviet Union and not with China. Famously, Castro said that Mao Zedong is un viejo, un líder senil, although now he's still doing politics, right? It can be labeled the same way. But, you know, after the end of the Soviet Union on December 25, 1981, and the huge impact that this carried to Cuba, China had became again important for Cuban foreign policy. Most analysts said that the most important economic partner of Cuba is Venezuela, and the second one is China. You know, I'm not sure about this because, you know, for China, it's a quite comfortable position to be portrayed as the number 2 partner, not as the number 1 partner. I'm not quite sure if they are not cooking the books a little bit. The impact of China, of course, oil is quite important. I will not argue with this. But the impact of China in the Cuban economy, I would say that it's more comprehensive and it touches many more sectors than the relationship with Venezuela. Other people have said that 5 minutes just started. Some people said that China have interest in Lourdes and Bejucal, that were 2 former Soviet Union facilities in Cuba, but nothing had been proved in this regard. There have been, of course, in Latin America, this protracted struggle about recognition between the Republic of China, Taiwan, and the People's Republic. And still roughly half of the diplomatic support of Taiwan, it's in Latin America and the Caribbean, around 11 countries over 23. I haven't counted recently, but it's a quite important block for Taiwan. There is a frozen situation since President Ma was elected in Taiwan. So both countries have avoided the continuation of this diplomatic struggle, but it can be resumed at any moment if political change is brought to Taiwan. This has always been an important component. There are some issues that are quite absent. Human rights, you know, despite the record of Argentina, for example, on human rights and the international profile in generating international law regarding human rights, Argentina had been quite silent about human rights things in China. Michelle Bachelet was in Beijing when there was the uprising in the Tibet, and she was basically forced to say that respected the unity of China and to neglect any comment on the human rights situation. Even the parliament in Chile reacted against this. Human rights have been an area in which most countries in Latin America have tried to avoid in the relationship with China. The Olympic torch in 2008, the only place in Latin America that visit was Buenos Aires, and there was no reaction against nothing going on in the human rights realm in Latin America. There is a whole discussion in China about soft power. In few places in the world, the soft power discussion have taken root as in China. And you know, any first paper on China and Latin America, usually in the third or fourth paragraph, it said, well, Latin America and China are far away, you know, geography, distance. And the following paragraph said, the cultural gap is immense. We don't understand each other, right? This is the standard first paper about China and Latin America. And you can see this first paper over and over since 1995, 2000, 2005, 2010. And it's basically the same paper, right? The first part is the same. But things have changed a lot. We have more probably than 25 Confucius Institutes in Latin America. There are many people studying Chinese, and there have been efforts done in this because of the importance of soft power for China. This is more important. It's a story that is attached with the idea of China about itself. It's more important than explain the relationship. I want to mention about the impact in the foreign policy. You know, a quite standard assumption is that if you have more economic relationship, probably more political relationship or a higher level of political relation will happen. So few years ago, I tried to analyze the impact of China increased trade on Latin American foreign policy. So how to answer this question? Well, I tried to study if there were any kind of impact in the voting pattern of Latin American country in the United Nations. So if the connection was correct, you must be able to see something, right? So I did this research from 2000 to 2010. And what I found was that Venezuela, particularly after the attempt of coup d'etat against Chavez, radicalized the foreign policy, and it began to be closer to that of China. In order to explain this, the lower the line, the closer the voting pattern with that of the United States. The higher the line, it's more different than the United States. So you can see evolution of Venezuela voting pattern, that now it's really much closer to that of China. In the case of Chile and Mexico, still very close to the voting pattern of the United States. Imagine Argentina with the Kirchner. You must guess that it was also changing a lot and becoming closer to that of China. But the result said no. Even with the change in political orientation in Argentina, the voting pattern of Argentina hasn't changed that much. The Kirchner have a voting pattern quite similar to Mexico and to Chile. And Brazil, which is the red line in the middle. You can see that Brazil have became, with the coming years, more independent compared with the United States voting pattern. Not still closer to China than Venezuela, but moving in this direction. So you have three kind of political responses or effects of the economic change. I would like to finish this very brief presentation with a comment about U.S. reactions, and that I think that is an understudied area of China-Latin American relation. You know, after 1823, with passing of the Monroe Doctrine, Latin America has been a space that has been crucial for the emergence of the United States as a global power. As the famous historian of the Cold War used to say, before becoming a superpower, the United States became a regional power in the Western Hemisphere. Being a superpower in the hemisphere, it's an issue that is fundamental for the identity of the United States as a superpower, right? So what is going on with China in Latin America, I think it's of crucial importance for U.S. identity. And, you know, China-United States relationship, it's the most important bilateral relationship in the whole world. That is a point that frequently is missing in the analysis in Latin America, that the emergence of China as a superpower was seen in many capitals as an opportunity for having more room of maneuver vis-a-vis the United States, as an opportunity for pursuing a more independent foreign policy. However, China has been very reluctant in engaging politically in Latin America. The first multilateral event will take place by the end of this year or the first months of 2015. It will be a meeting between China and CELAC. And the United States and China have developed a bilateral dialogue about Latin America, starting in April of 2006, when the Assistant Secretary for the Western Hemisphere Affairs, Thomas Shannon, visited Beijing. There has been a dialogue between China and Latin America, trying to avoid a trigger for a conflict that can affect the upper level of this quite important bilateral relationship. And so this is a quite extraordinary event in the foreign policy of the United States, recognizing China as equal status in a region that have always been crucial for its own identity. I would like to stop here. Of course, we can expand on the points and the questions. Thank you very much.